Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on today's video. I am very, very excited about this. Today we have Chance, who has lost over 300 pounds. He used to be 600 pounds at one point. Like, it's an absolutely insane story, so I'm excited to get into that. But before we get into that, I do want to say, if you do enjoy these videos and you look at the chat and you're like, man, I would love to be a part of that, I would love to have you. So I stream every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm actually going to be streaming right around the time that this video is released, so if you are watching it right when it's released, you can click that link down in the bio and you can join me, and I would love to have you. But that would be really, really cool. But yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know about that. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Chance, thank you so much for coming on and being willing to talk. I'm super excited about this. I know that your journey, so you were at your heaviest, you were over 600 pounds, right?
Yeah, I would guesstimate over 600. I always cap it off at 600. I was in the hospital. They weighed me on a bariatric lift scale, and it was 597 pounds, but that was also being sick and in the hospital and not eating. So I guarantee within that few days I was there, I probably dropped those 3 pounds. So I'm going to take a pretty good shot in the dark and say 600 tops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. So, okay, so what I want to do here is go and instead of like talking about like, you know, your journey for losing the weight, which I think is important, I'm kind of curious, like, how did you get to that weight? Like, what was were you always kind of overweight, stuff like that? Like, I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah. For the most part, like all my life, I was the fat kid, the big kid. Stereotypical, teased on, picked on through elementary school. High school was the same way. I was the biggest kid in the class. And looking back now through this journey process, I've come to realize I've always had used food as a coping mechanism to deal with trauma and bullying and things of that nature. So in general, it's always been there, and I've always been big. There's never been no two ways around it. No.
So when you were really young, you were kind of always, did you kind of just like gain weight throughout your whole life? Or was there ever a time when you were like, I remember not being overweight, and then I started gaining weight at this point? Was there anything like that?
No. I mean, I was always big, but I was always to the point where like I could function, I could move. Yes, I had to shop in the large kids section through high school. Couldn't wear what my other peers were wearing for clothes or whatever, but I was still always big. And then as you grow, I just grew, but I just grew out more than everyone else. And then in my young adulthood, it was the same thing. It drastically picked up to the point where I, wasn't physically able to do anything, was slowing down at work, and everything was probably when I was early 30s. Everything just kind of ramped up from there.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to ask. Like, when did you start to kind of notice, like, yo, my weight is really starting to like hinder my life? Because so for me, just to kind of bring it back to give you a little bit of context for me, was when I was 20 years old, and I remember I wasn't super like my weight wasn't really causing me too many issues as far as like what I could do, but it was like the writing was on the wall for me pretty much, and it was like I know that I've said many times, like, I knew before 40, like I'm not sure if I'll get there. Right. And so for me, that was like scary enough to kind of motivate me, but there were obviously other external factors that helped in that. Yeah. So for you say it was like 30. So what started to happen? Were there things that you started to notice that you're like, wait, I remember being able to do this or being able to do that?
Yeah, like just physical activity limited. going up a flight of stairs was getting hard. Getting in and out of a vehicle was getting hard. One thing for me was finding safety clothes. Like I work a lot of like trades jobs, construction, and then you have to wear a certain type of protective equipment. I couldn't wear it anymore. I drive equipment. I drive big semi truck. I couldn't for the longest time I'd be like, well, I can only drive this truck in our fleet because that's the only one that could fit me. And then I was like, but I still didn't, as long as I kept making a paycheck, as long as I kept doing that, everything was fine. It was when I couldn't provide for myself or my family, that's when I was like, whoa. But instead of fixing it right away, I let it get more out of control because I ended up in a depressive state, and I just kind of lied in bed for almost a year, more or less. Yeah.
So what, like, do you remember kind of like what your weight was at that point? And then when you kind of hinted at it earlier, you ended up in a hospital in a bariatric scale. So I mean, I would love to hear that story and what led you to that point as well.
I think when like we talked about, like, the not being able to fit and work or whatever, but I don't know. I think like it was always on the back of my mind that this wasn't good, but as long as I could ignore it, right? So I think it was around, probably would have been like in and around that 500, 525 mark. It's hard for me to say because obviously there was never scales, bathroom scales, never big enough. When I'd go to the doctor, he would give me something in kilograms. I didn't bother to do the conversion because I didn't care. I would just, give me my pills, let me take my pain meds, and away I went, right? Like I lived in complete denial of all issues for the longest time.
I'm not trying to interrupt, but I mean, it's just so I relate to that so hard. Like living in just being like, I remember I've said this before, but when I was in 10th grade, my mom dragged me to the doctors, and I ended up going there, and they basically let me know at that point that I was pre-diabetic, right?
Right.
And I remember thinking, oh, dude, I'm good. In my head, I was like, I know eventually I'll be diabetic probably, but like, that's not for a while because I'm not even pre yet. And it's just crazy looking back and just being in 10th grade thinking that like, oh, that's fine. Like, that's eventually where I'll go. It's just.
Yeah. And it's crazy too. You talk about that because, I mean, being as big as I did, I'd have a lot of breathing problems. So I'd go to the doctors, and of course, they would run all the tests, blood pressure, diabetes, this, that, and everything else. It wasn't until I reached into that tipping point in the 500-pound mark where anyone ever mentioned anything about diabetes to me. I would always come in there and they'd be like, well, your blood pressure is a little high, but it's not as bad as it. Like, a lot of doctors were shocked because I didn't have high blood pressure. I didn't have high cholesterol. I mean, even as big as I was still fairly active. I didn't sit around the house and watch a lot of TV. Like I said, I work, construction and trades. I'd have to be moving. And I guess for a man that size, it took a lot of energy. And I don't know if that had something to do with the cholesterol or blood pressure, but I did have the one doctor around that size tell me I was pre-diabetic. And I was like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do? He sent me home with a little test kit, and he's like, I want you to track and test for a whole 6 months and then come back to me. That thing ended up sitting in the junk drawer, and I never touched it. So, because again, it's that complete denial. I didn't want to listen. I mean, I kept going to him and asking him how I could, well, doc, you need to help me lose this weight. And he would tell me all the things that I needed to do, and I wouldn't do them.
Yeah. It's like it's like you're like, no, fix me, okay? That's why I just do it. I don't want to have to do the things, right? I'm sure a lot of people know exactly what that's like. I think because and I know that you're from Canada, but in the U.S., I think like a lot of the culture is about like going to the doctors to fix things. And a lot of times, I'm not saying all the time, please. I'm not trying to say like every disease or anything can be fixed by you handling your diet and exercise and stuff like that. But like a lot of people go there because they're like, I just need a pill to fix me, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, it sounds like that's kind of what you were looking for. And sadly, I mean, maybe not sadly, but they're like, you gotta do it yourself. Like we can't just like, all right, let me just take this off of you. Okay, there you go. It's all good to go now.
No, that's exactly I think what I was looking for, and I would switch doctor to doctor to doctor too, because I was like, oh, that I didn't like that guy. He was mean to me. No, he wasn't mean to me. He was calling me out. And there was one doctor that was brutally honest, and of course I never seen him for the longest time after he was brutally honest. The one thing that he did say to me that did resonate a lot with me is he did tell me that in order for me to lose weight, he could prescribe me all the pills in the world. He can help control my insulin levels with my, like at that point in time, I was pre-diabetic or whatever. And he said, I can help you, can do all this, but if you don't change your mindset, you're not going to lose weight. And of course, I basically looked at him, laughed, stumbled my way out of the office and sank into a depressive state, because like that was what I needed to hear. But of course it took me a long time to realize that that's what I needed to do.
Yeah, I think like, I mean, this conversation in and of itself is really important to have, and I think there's a lot of nuance to be had with this, because there definitely are doctors, and like this is a conversation I've had with my friend Spencer Nadolski. He's an obesity specialist, where he talks a lot about how like there are a lot of doctors that are just useless when it comes to obesity, and they're just like, oh, just lose weight, see you later, right? Like that's not helpful. So it's like, where do we find like being real and like being honest about things, but also not completely sugarcoating? Like instead of like being completely real and honest and being mean is one thing,
right?
But then like it's also not good to be completely sugarcoat things and be like, oh, everything's fine. No, your weight has nothing to do with this. Why would you think that? It's like, well, come on, let's be real. I'm 500 pounds or whatever it might be. It's like, let's find that middle ground, which you know how it is. It's in the world of social media and stuff, it's hard to find the middle ground. It's easy to find the extremes on each side. But I think that it's a really important conversation to have, because like you were the person that had to have that conversation with the doctor. And yes, it sucked at the time when, you know, he was real with you and you were like, whatever. But it's something you remember. So it obviously stuck in some capacity.
It did take on, and I mean, I still think about it to this day. Not too long ago, I did go back to him because my doctor unfortunately left to go run a practice in another city. So I'm like, well, you know what? Why don't I go back to this doctor? And you know, he went and looked through my file, and he's like, "You were my patient 3 years ago. You weren't this size 3 years ago." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, you diagnosed me pre-diabetic. I'm no longer that. But I listened to what you said, and I, you know, started going to therapy." Like it only took me like 6 months after you saying that, and almost, you know, dying again in the hospital to realize that's kind of what I needed to do first. I mean, I couldn't get into diet and exercise unless I wanted to care about myself enough to do so. And obviously I wasn't caring about myself at all.
Dude, that's so important, man. Like I've said that so many times. Like people think like, oh, you just lose weight. Like if you hate yourself, like just hate the fact that you're fat and like do that through hate and you can lose weight. And it's like, I think like if you're going to lose weight and do what it takes to actually lose the weight and keep it off, like that has to come from a place of self-love. Like you can maybe hate what the fat has done to your body and what it restricts you from doing. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that's pretty normal. But if you are going to put in the work that it takes to actually lose weight day after day, meal after meal, session after session, like that's coming from a place of self-love. And like you said, like if you don't have it, it's not going to happen, man. It's not going to happen.
No, not at all. And, you know, it took pretty well a year or more of, well, a little less than a year of therapy sessions weekly, because again, looking back on this journey, I've dealt with mental health my entire life sometimes I knew I was dealing it. Other times I didn't. Sometimes I'd ignore it, like a lot of people do. But really going there and changing my cognitive like thinking patterns and my cognitive behavioral patterns to the point where I am worthy of doing this. I am worthy of loving myself enough to try to make a change. And that to me is the tipping point of how I made this happen. It was more a mental thing than it was a diet and exercise for me. I will say that hands down.
Yeah, and I think that that's so true, and like so many people feel like they think, and I think you made a post about this recently. They think that losing the weight will just solve all of the issues, and it's like I've brought this meme up that I saw years ago when I first started my Instagram. But it was like a picture of this, like it was like a stick figure drawing of like a fat person. It said, "I hate myself," and then they lost the weight, and it was like a skinny stick figure person. And it said, "Well, that wasn't it." And it's like, I'm telling you, man. You cannot expect losing, like, it will help certain things, of course, but it's not going to solve everything. Like, it's just not.
No, and like you said, it'll help certain things, and don't ever get. I don't want anyone to ever get me wrong, especially about that post that I just made recently. But like, I'm grateful for all the things it's allowed me to do, and those changes have brought me happiness. However, just by taking off, like it was like if you were wearing a weighted vest. If I took off a 300-pound weighted vest, that doesn't necessarily fix my mental health. That doesn't necessarily make me all of a sudden a better person. In my own eyes. I mean, lots of people think that, and maybe not. Maybe I'm just speaking whatever, but it's not the solution. It has to come from within. It has to come from a place of depth.
Yeah.
So
okay, so we got a little sidetracked. So I want to talk about like you end up in the hospital, right? Tell me that story. How did that happen? What was that about?
Which time?
Well, when you said, like, when you started like losing weight, you had to weigh yourself on the bariatric scale, and maybe that's not when you decided to start losing weight, but I just know you brought that up earlier, so I'm just kind of curious about what led you to that.
I'd already been going to therapy. That was when I ended up in that hospital bed again, which was like the last time I was ever there was May 18th, 2019. And I ended up with a cellulitis infection. I'd have numerous ones of these over the course of being as big as I was. This one.
What is that? I've never heard of that before.
It's basically like a bacterial skin infection, and with people being as big as I was, you retain a lot of fluid in your legs, like through lymph or whatever. And what happens is, from my understanding, what my doctor told me is that fluid builds up, and then obviously your skin will crack and break because it swells so much, and you'll drip all that fluid out. But those little cuts and sores can become infected, and when they become infected, you can obviously get infection in and all throughout your body, right? And then there's pictures on my Instagram of my worst one that I had. Your legs swell up and they turn red, and it almost looks like they're just starting to rot a little bit. Like they are fairly graphic photos, but it's just really, really bad skin material.
Yeah, I've seen photos of that, and I mean, dude, just hearing you explain it, like I've said before, when I was at my heaviest, I felt like I was trapped in like this obese body that I was in. Like I just didn't feel like I was living. I felt like I was existing. But man, hearing that, like I just can't imagine what it must feel like to like look down at your legs and just being like, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm very happy for you is all I'm trying to, like, I'm very happy that you're doing better.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it is a surreal feeling, especially that time that it was terribly bad. Like my body became septic, and that's like almost, it's life threatening at that point.
Oh yeah.
fast forward to where I am in the hospital, and I have another one. It's not near as bad, but of course they have to weigh me. They wanted on their chart my weight. Obviously, I can't stand on the little old-fashioned slide scale thing. The digital scale doesn't read my weight. But of course, I'm in a bariatric patient bed, which is extra wide, extra big, and it has a crane hoist. And that bariatric scale, they roll you one way and put you on this net roll the other. So you look like a whale up on a net, and then it just holds you there and it grabs your weight. And they told me it in kilograms. And I mean, I know in Canada they use kilograms, but I've always used pounds for weighing anything. And so I asked Google to give me the conversion, and it did. And it said 597 pounds. And I'm like, wow, that's literally 3 pounds away from being on my 600-pound life. And right there, it was like, okay, I need to try to figure out some sort of method on how to do it. And like, obviously being big my whole life, you know, you try just to eat healthy, and you've tried taking slim fast, and you've tried doing this, and you've tried doing that, right? So you kind of have some knowledge, but I didn't have a lot of knowledge. So this time I just kind of, something in my head kind of clicked, and I was just like, you're gonna die. You've been to the hospital once, if not twice a month this entire year.
Wow.
Figure out something. Luckily, I had a friend in real life who was actually having great success with her weight loss. So I said, so, well, what are you doing? And then, of course, she told me she was doing the ketogenic diet. And I said, well, you know, what is it? And she told me what it is. And then I started YouTubing. I started researching. And from there, it just spiraled into what this is now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. But I mean, just kind of, I'll just start where you kind of left off with the keto thing, because I mean, literally one of the last videos, like 2 videos ago that I put up, I was talking about, there's this big YouTuber that's like, he was trying to do Nutrisystem, and then like it ended up not being sustainable for him. So then he had a friend of his like try to get him to do keto. And this guy's like, you know, not like morbidly obese or anything like that. And I kind of talk about how I personally am not like, I don't recommend keto to people, right? And so for the most part, but again, like I have definitely in the past few years have been more open. Like back in the day, I used to be like, keto stupid, don't do it. No one should do it. It's not necessary. But like stories like yours have definitely opened my eyes to the, you know, to how it can actually help someone. Because I mean, for lack of a better term, like it saved your life, obviously, right? And so for me to say it's completely stupid and it has no merit is just not right, you know? And so what I'm just kind of curious, as someone that has never done it, like what was it about keto that you felt that you could like that helped you, you know, like that none of these other diets were able to help you?
Honestly, I think for me, when I started looking into YouTube and whatnot, and a bit of the science behind it just kind of seemed to make a little more sense to me. In my mind, and this is me being rural and blue collar sort of guy, it was like a vehicle with 2 gas tanks. One would run off of carbohydrates and the other one would run off of fat. And basically, if I kept my gas tank and filled that gas tank instead of with carbohydrates, I filled it with fats, but I kept it at a low level. If it wanted to keep running, it would have to burn off the fats that were in my backup tank, which was my overall body. And that's the easiest way for me to get my head around it. Another thing is I just seen the real results, because I've seen people do Beachbody. I've seen people do all these other different programs in my real world, not on the Instagram world. And, you know, they'd lose 10, 15 pounds and then they'd fall off these diets, right? But I kept seeing the real results of my friend And I was like, well, this is real. Like this, she's done amazing. And I'm kind of impatient, and her results were quick. And I'm like, I want those quick results too. I need those quick results too. So that's why I went with it. That's why I chose it. And the fact that a lot of the foods that are on it are foods that I do enjoy. I'm not, and everyone has this thing about keto where it's like, just drink butter. That's not to me how it works, and that's never how it worked. My meals when I started were basic real food. I had a protein, which was generally pork or chicken, and then I had a side salad or some vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Tracked my macros. Like I would weigh my food when I was making a salad. I would, like, if I wanted tomatoes and cucumbers, I'd weigh up every little piece of tomato and cucumber. That's just what I had to do. So it wasn't where like you see some of these pictures on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook even, where it's like, oh, I can have keto and I just, drink butter and eat bacon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer in too much of anything can be bad for anybody. Mm-hmm. Like I'm not like, and again, I was always like, calories in, calories out, because a lot of the research I did still showed, like, you with the macro tracking or whatever, if you want to lose weight, you have to be in calorie deficit. Mm-hmm. With keto, calorie deficit and keto and the way it attacks your fat cells, it just kind of speeds up the process. Mm-hmm. to make it as simple as it sounds, I guess. I'm not a scientist. And no one on here quote me on these things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that it's really important that you at least acknowledge, or that it's still like calories in, calories out. I would say that it used to be like back in the day. I remember when I first started, because I remember first starting, like, keto's been around for a while, but like when I first started YouTube, not many people were talking about it. And then like a few years into YouTube, I started getting questions and questions and questions about it. And it seemed like when it first kind of started coming around, people were basically saying you can eat as many calories as you want, as long as you don't have carbs, you can lose weight, right? And I remember just being like, dude, that's just not how the body works. But like for me, if you want to do keto, but you acknowledge and understand, it's not even acknowledge, but if you understand, it's still calories in, calories out. The way your body is working is the way every other human's body works, is through calories in, calories out. But you just decide to use different fuel. Like, again, it's not something I would do, but I'm not going to say that you're wrong, because you're not. That's how the body works.
Exactly. Like, I don't know. If I as a person who's an overeater, if someone tells me I can eat too much, well, I'm probably going to. Mm-hmm. And that's what got me into this problem in the first place, was using food to cope, and to this and to that. And I overate everything. My daily calories used to be in the 10,000s.
Yeah. I mean, then that's just the truth, right? To maintain a body that large, like you have, that's why when people, like, I'm sure you've seen my 600-pound life, when Dr. Now always asks, like, how much are you eating? And they're like, I eat like 2,000 calories. And he's like, come on, dude. Like, there's just no way.
Exactly. Right. And then I would watch YouTube videos of people saying, like, track your food and try to remember what you used to eat in a day. And I did that a few times. I'm like, man, I would put away crazy amounts of food, 2 bowls of cereal in the morning, and pop, and take out for lunch, like at McDonald's, like, and you wouldn't just have a number 6. Well, you'd have 2 number 6s or whatever, right? You'd have 2 Big Macs. You have to,
dude.
That's it. And then supper time would roll around. You'd eat a big supper,
soda.
Then you'd snack after, like 15 minutes later, you'd sit down on the couch and you'd eat a bag of Doritos, family size, and drink a 2-liter of pop.
It's always you always get the bigger size, right? Like I've said this many times, but my McDonald's order, 2 McDoubles, 2 McChickens, a large fry, sometimes nuggets, and a large drink. That's like so much freaking food, but it was like I ate to feel very full, not just to feel satiated. It was like, I want to feel so full that it's like, okay, I just want to sit down now. Like, that's how every meal was for me.
Yeah, that's exactly the same. And And the weird thing is just, I guess, by doing this now and learning to listen to my body, I would be so full, but I would still consume. Like, it would be to the point where I would feel sick. I literally remember going to lie down 10 minutes, and then you start to feel better again. And then you'd go and finish the rest of that bag of chips that you had lying around. Like, it was real.
I remember being in high school and we watched Super Size Me in my economics class. And I remember everyone else was like, oh, that's so gross. Like, how could you do that? And I remember thinking, man, I want some McDonald's now. So bad.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so you started doing keto, you started losing weight. Like, what was going through your mind at that point? Like, was there a moment, I get this question a lot, was there a moment when you started losing the weight that you were like, it's happening, like I'm doing it? And how did that feel for you?
Honestly, I think my first month, and I probably should have like looked it up on my records because I did have it saved on my phone. Within the first month, I think I lost close to like 25, 30 pounds. And I was like, I've never done that in my life. But even just that first initial drop, I felt amazing. And then I obviously at that size, my back hurt when I stood up for more than 5 minutes at a time. But I was like, you know what? If I can keep continuing eating like this is just bound to happen. So I would stand up a bit more and I would walk a bit more. And everything at that point in time was just try hard, push, try. Because the feelings I got when I kept seeing those numbers on the scale dropping was just more fuel, right? More fuel.
It's crazy. It's crazy that you were able, I know I'm interrupting you, I'm sorry, people are going to be mad at me, but I can't help it. It's crazy that like at that time you were able to stand up though, because like, and I'm sure you know this, like you are so close to being at a point where you can't get up. And like once that happens, dude, it's just downhill real fast. So it's just like you caught it just at like the last moment that you could.
Yeah, pretty much, because I mean, oh man, the day before I went on my diet was July 1st, 2019, or that was the day before. I started July 2nd, 2019. So that day before on the 1st was our Canada Day, like your guys' 4th of July. And of course I'm gonna go out with friends and I'm gonna go see Buddy down at the lake. I had a specialty chair from Bass Pro Shop that was load rated for 350 pounds. That's a good chair. I maxed that thing out. And I would basically take that with me everywhere I went. It would act like a walker almost, or a cane. I'd take it, I'd sit down, and I sat there the rest of the afternoon. We were having drinks, being social, and of course I had to go to the bathroom. Well, it was literally 20 feet away, but I remember going like, I'm not going to be able to walk over there. And I had to pause at 10 feet and I had to catch my breath. And then I of course, I continued on the rest of the day, went to the fireworks show, had ice cream, this, that, everything else. I said to my wife the next day, I'm like, I'm so glad I'm done with this because I never want to feel that way again. That was like one of the worst days of my life. And that was at the very last point. And basic human function, like even trying to wash yourself in the shower was darn near impossible. Mm-hmm. It's just a miserable existence.
It's wild that was like the day before you decided to lose weight. And it's funny because it seems like you had that switch where you were like, it wasn't just, well, this is just how life is. It was, this is how life is right now. And it's not going to be like this forever because I'm going to change it, And that's a huge switch, to be like, I can change it. And that's like so important for so many people that are like really, really large. I know personally, like there were so many years that I lived that it was like, it wasn't like, I just didn't think it was possible to lose weight. I didn't believe it was possible. I used to think like the only way I could do it is if I go on The Biggest Loser. Like that was I remember that thought. My mom even signed me up one year, but they never called me back. But I just remember thinking like the only way I can do it is if I have this and that and that and that. Like there's just no way I can do it on my own. And the fact that you that day you remember thinking like, I'm so glad that I don't have to live like this anymore because I'm going to make a change. I mean, that's so important.
Yeah, and obviously, again, I think it almost goes back to like what you're talking about, like going on The Biggest Loser, this, that, or everything. I attribute so much of it to working on my mental health, but also seeing a friend in real life do it, because I do live so rural, out in the middle of nowhere. The only people that lost weight were the guys that went on Ellen, right? It was you. It was guys on Dr. Phil. It was all these other people, and I'm like, well, that's so, to me, so unattainable, so far off from the world that I live in, that it just didn't seem like it was possible. So for having her have such great success was like, well, it is possible. It is possible. Regular every day. And then of course I started, searching around Instagram, and I'm seeing like, when I first started Instagram, I was like only friends with moms in their like 50s and 40s. I was seeing all these moms, and I'm like, oh yeah, Karen, she's doing amazing, kind of a bitch, but she's doing great. but I would see those real people, not to say that like, you aren't real or whatever, but it was having these real people do, and it gave me such hope that I knew deep down it could be done. Yeah, there's days I struggle big time, and I think, man, like, is this gonna get harder? I know it is. I know I'm just gonna have to work harder, and not to say that I didn't work hard before, but it's a different type now. Yeah.
So, well, I want to make it clear, I went on Ellen after I lost the weight. All right. But okay, so I kind of want to talk about like with keto, because one thing that's really interesting to me, and something that I've talked about many times, is maybe I'm wrong. So if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, please. But like, I think keto would be very hard to do something that you do for the rest of your life. Like considering being on keto, not having carbs anymore for, like the rest of your life. So do you plan on doing that, or do you have a plan for once you get off of keto, introducing like carbs back into your diet? And what is your thought process on that? Is that something that you've even thought about much up to this point? Because like that's something that I eat a lot of carbs every day, like a lot, right? So the thought of not having them is just, it really is like, I couldn't imagine that, which again, that's just my own ignorance to never doing keto. But like, is that something that you think about? What's the plan? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but
I've definitely seen lately, some people I follow on Instagram, they have converted themselves back to a little carb, and it's whole carbs. They still stay away from refined or processed sugars and stuff like that. For me, I honestly don't know. My first keto Christmas, no, I didn't eat my mom's homemade pumpkin pie, and I didn't have turkey and stuffing. This year, yeah, I had a spoonful of it. There are times that I know I overindulge, where even if on keto food, I know I'm overindulging that special 20 net number that everyone talks about. I know it. I'll do that. And that's okay. For a lot of the carb-based foods that people miss, like rice, pasta, bread, I was never big into eating that stuff to begin with. For me, I honestly don't know. I think there might come a time where I will probably, on special occasions like Christmas, I'll have a slice of mom's pumpkin pie or something. But right now, that doesn't seem like I don't feel like I'm there yet. But I honestly think I'll probably continue to eat this way for as long as I can, for as long as it's working for me. I think that's my best.
So I'm kind of curious then, like, this is just genuine curiosity. Like, when you say, like, you believe that it's calories in, calories out, that's how you lose weight, that's like the most important thing. What is it about like carbs in general that kind of like you don't want to introduce them? Like, say if you were still in a deficit, right? You were still eating in a caloric deficit, you should be able to lose weight, right, with having carbs. So what is it about maybe doing that? And again, I'm not trying to make you eat carbs. I'm just trying to pick your brain. Like, what is it about maybe doing that you still kind of seem to be like, I don't know if I want to do that?
I think for me, it's honestly, it's fear. It's fear that I will probably slip back to my old ways. I hear people argue that sugar is addicting. I hear they say, well, that's just a myth. I'm not one to come here and crack that. But for me, I think it would definitely trigger something in my mind to go back that way. And just, I don't know if it's almost like a disloyal to my brand or what I've done. Like, I mean, I don't. And here's the thing too, like I'll hashtag something keto, but when someone in real life comes and asks me for advice, I tell them straight up, what I do is this, but that might not necessarily be for you.
Mm-hmm.
These are some other options, because obviously I'm not an expert keto. I'm not an expert at weight loss by any means, or the certain types, but I will say you've got to find what works for you, and you've got to be in calorie deficit.
Mm-hmm.
I think me wanting to stay keto is more or less, I think it would trigger a lot of things, and I could binge hard on junk food and carbs. Like I discussed this with a few people the other day. It'd be nothing for me to go and crush that bag of Doritos and eat a plate of mashed potatoes. I could do it right now. Mm-hmm. So I think it's more of a self-control thing, and maybe there'll come a time where I feel like I have that self-control, but for right now, I don't know. It's kind of one of those mental things, right? I know the science behind it. Like I know I could go introduce some carbs like sweet potato or something like that, something good, jasmine rice, whatever. But I just feel for me, it could create bad habits again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I'm not sitting here trying to tell you what to do. I think that you've obviously found something that works, and like it's still relatively new, right? It hasn't even been 2 full years. And like for me, I've had the weight off for 8 years. And so I don't want to sit here and tell you what you should be doing. I mean, I will say if you ever have any questions, feel free to send me a message, because like I'm here for you, right? Like I'm a resource if you ever have any questions. But I do genuinely appreciate the honesty with that, because that I kind of felt bad asking that, because you weren't expecting it.
No, all right.
But I think that it's really important, because I think there are a lot of people that might feel similar to you that maybe don't want to admit that, because it makes you feel like whatever. It might make you feel like you're like you said, like going against the keto people, you know? And so I think that's really, really important. And then so like kind of like the last thing that I want to ask, because we've been talking for 40 minutes. The last thing I want to ask is just overall like exercise. Like if you have done exercise, haven't done exercise, because this is a question I get every time. Like, what's the exercise you did? So was exercise super important to you at the start? Was it not? What are you doing now? Just kind of an overall on that.
Yeah, you bet. Exercise at the beginning was virtually nothing besides walking. I would take walks around town. Once I got like all jazzed about what I was doing and my body felt better and I could move more, I started lifting things, and legit just random inanimate objects. I had a piece of a chunk of railway iron, like that a train would go on, and a piece of railway track, and I would just pick it up with a rope and I'd lift it up and down.
That's freaking cool.
Yeah, it likes it when I pull that out. But then a cousin-in-law of mine gave me a bench with some dumbbells. He's like, I don't even know where my barbell is. So I started with just this bench and these dumbbells, and I do simple dumbbell workouts. Now I got a bar, I do a barbell workout. I do sit-ups, I do push-ups. Obviously my push-ups were modified. I do them inverted against the tailgate of my truck or the kitchen countertop, things like that. I would do when I was still big, I would do sit-ups on the edge of my bed. My feet would hang over, and as long as I could just up and down with my feet hanging over, that was good because that was still a form of movement. And whatever I researched, it was like, all right, if I'm moving, I'm burning calories. Therefore, do these. It'll help build some sort of muscles. I don't think you have any core muscles, Chance, but just keep doing them when you might. So,
No,
and,
I
and
mean,
then that's where it came from.
yeah, and I agree, and I think that's something that I say a lot is weight loss happens in the kitchen, fitness happens in the gym. So like understand that like the food that you're putting into your body is much more important than the exercise that you're doing because like you said, it's very easy to eat 1,000 calories. It's very hard to burn 1,000, right? And so I think that that's super important, especially like I get messages all the time from people that are bigger. They're like, I want to start working out. What should I do? And I'm like, get your diet in check first and just do something that gets you moving. That could be walking for a long time. Like, and I still go on walks as a form of exercise. Like walking is very underrated. I've said it many times. But like, don't feel like you have to do what the Instagram video is showing you, or you have to do what the YouTube video shows you. If it's like you said, if it's getting you to move and it's getting you to burn calories, that will be helpful in losing weight because the more calories you burn, the more calories you have to eat. It's that simple.
Yeah, and like that again, just that simple movement and being all jazzed on it. I used to hate it. I for like 2 years I never went into a Walmart to buy groceries with my family. And then I was excited to because I would always park. Now I'd park 2 or 3 spots back further. I'd walk in there and then I'd walk to the store. And that was literally getting that exercise was just buying groceries. And it was everything that I wanted on my little keto list of romaine lettuce and pork chops. And that was it. And I was like, and I would feel these, but I moved. And that was it. But again, I think I've heard people say it's like 80% nutrition, 20% fitness. Work it in around there somewhere, but your nutrition has to be on point.
Yeah.
For whatever plan or process or whatever you're doing, it has to be on point. You can't eat like an idiot and lose weight.
Absolutely. I mean, I think because the nutrition part is an all-day thing that you have to focus on. People are just hoping that, if I just go really hard in the gym for an hour, I'll negate everything that I've done. It's just, sadly, it doesn't work like that. Regardless of how much weight you've lost, like even me, I can't just eat whatever I want because I'm a fit person. That, you know what I mean? It just doesn't work like that. It's just not how it works.
No.
Well, sweet, man. I just want to say thank you so much. Seriously, this has been a fantastic talk. This was really, really fun. I cannot believe how much time has gone by. If people want to find you, where would they go about doing that?
Instagram is like the only thing I use. So, at _chance_trying. And that's how you find me.
Sweet, dude. Well, thank you so much, man.
All right. Thank you very much.